There's a dead bird over there.
This is an average amount of plastic in this chick.
What's happening on Midway is like the canary in the coal mine. That patch of garbage in the Pacific is growing, and right now it's having a huge impact on the species that call Midway home.
Plastics will play as large a role in peace as they do in war.
Every day, we add estrogen-like chemicals to our body through plastics.
It's like we're all in the midst of a giant, uncontrolled experiment.
Without your permission, you are being polluted. Is that okay with you?
Oh my gosh.
The story has to be told because the solution doesn't lie with the people here.
A lot of people are just in this robot mode, and they're just like, you know, how many times have you bought a drink and a snack, and they put it in a bag? It just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh, this is so unnecessary. Why am I using these?
It's just about taking a little shift.
It's our choice. And I don't want to play that game and see, well, how far can it take?
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to the panel for Plastic Paradise. My name is Brenda Carr. I'm a volunteer with the Brattleboro Film Festival. On my right, our first panelist is Falko Schilling. He's a consumer protection advocate at Vermont Public Interest and Research Group. And then we have our two other panelists are from Newburyport, Massachusetts. They spearheaded a campaign to ban single-use plastic bags in their community. Please welcome Sheila Taintor and Janine Looker, Brunel Looker, I'm sorry. First, we'll have the panelists will each comment individually, and then we'll be taking questions from the audience. So Falko, could you tell us about current legislation that's happening in Vermont?
Happy to do that. Just to introduce myself a little bit more, as you know, my name is Falko Schilling, and I'm with Vermont Public Interest Research Group. We're the state's largest nonprofit environment and consumer advocacy group. We have about 40,000 members and supporters across the entire state of Vermont. You probably know some of our canvassers who've knocked on your doors during the summer months, but we work on a really wide range of issues, from things having to do with environmental concerns, consumer protection concerns, and I've been with the organization about 4 years now. I started out leading our campaign to label GMO foods, and now I'm really excited to be working on Thank you. Which I have to say, the community of Brattleboro was incredible to work with on that issue. So much energy, and I'm originally from just up the road in Saxons River, Vermont, so it's really fun to be down here, back in Windham County and back in the Latches, so this is great. I can tell you a little bit about the legislation that we're looking at this year, which addresses some of the issues which we heard about in the film today. One of the big campaigns we're really excited about is a campaign to ban microbeads in the state of Vermont. And the film didn't discuss microbeads in depth, but it really did. It touched on the issue. Microbeads are small little bits of plastic. They're exfoliates. You'll find them in things like face scrub and toothpaste. And the thing that's really frustrating about these small, tiny bits of plastic is they are completely unnecessary. There's something that have been added to these products by the industry so they don't have to spend the money on natural alternatives. And also, they're less abrasive and less effective, so you can use them more and more often, and they can sell more products. And what this does is it puts these tiny plastic beads into our waterways, and they are not caught by filtration systems, and then they end up in our lakes and in our rivers. And there's a recent estimate that came out, about 8 trillion of these microbeads end up in our waterways every single day. Just to give you an idea, that's about 300 tennis courts covered in microbeads every single day. And they are completely unnecessary. I'm sure many of you have seen things like apricot face scrub, where they crush up apricot cores. This is what we're saying is what the industry should be moving to. Luckily, this year, California has passed a ban on microbeads. Connecticut also passed a ban this last year. We have a bill that's currently in front of the Senate. It passed the House of Representatives last year, 140 to nothing. So we're feeling really excited about this, and we're moving forward with it this year. As we go forward, I do have a little bit more information about some of the campaigns I'll tell you about, but it's one of those things, if you want to help support this, you can just contact your senators and let them know. I can get into a little bit more about that. But that's one of the big campaigns we're excited to be working on this year. And the bill number, if anyone's interested, is H4. It's very easy to remember. But two other campaigns or bills that we're supporting this year up in the Vermont legislature, which directly relate to the film that you just saw, are two bills, one proposing a ban on single-use bags, and the other one proposing a tax on single-use bags. I spend most of my, January through May up in the Vermont legislature working in different committees, working as a lobbyist for the public interest, which is a great way to spend your time. And after seeing these two bills being discussed last year, I would say that it's much more likely we're going to see movement on the fee on plastic bags. The ban has faced a little bit more opposition, but the underlying benefit of that is they're looking at this fee on single-use plastic bags, and they want to use that revenue to help support the state's universal recycling system, which has been passed. It's called Act 148. It's going to be going into place over the next 5 years or so, which will eventually get us to mandatory curbside recycling and compost, which is an exciting thing. So this is a place where we need revenue as a state, and we're saying you should be doing that by putting a tax on plastic bags, if not banning them. There's a couple other ways we think we can be environmentally friendly and help support our recycling programs, but that's one of them. So that's a little bit about the current legislation, and I'll shut up for now.
Great, thanks, Falko. Next, we'll talk to Janine and Sheila. And they spearheaded a movement in Newburyport, Massachusetts, their community, that resulted in a ban on plastic bags. And seems like a daunting effort, so I'd like to hear how you did that.
It was about 3 years ago that we started working on this, and the ban was signed into legislation on October 1st, 1914, went into effect 6 months later, and now we've been with the bag ban for 7 months and 7 days.
And how's that working for you in your community? How is...
It's making a big difference. There are no plastic bags being given out at the grocery stores or other stores. CVS has started giving out a thicker mill plastic bag, which passes the ban's requirements, but they're just giving them out to customers easily. So they're missing the point of the ban that we hope will be changed. Other people are going for paper bags, which don't have the pollution effects that plastic do, but they do have a huge environmental effect on fossil fuels. So, because they require more fossil fuels being expended in their manufacture and in their transportation to the places where they're dispensed. So paper bags are not a solution. We need to go to reusable bags.
Thank you, Sheila.
I'll introduce myself as well. My name is Janine, and I think that the thing that is important for me to say in an attempt to sort of share our story is that I don't think we ever once thought that banning single-use plastic bags in Newburyport, Mass. Would save the world. I saw it more as an opportunity to empower ourselves and to empower our children. This information in these movies is vitally important. The movie that we watched a lot was called Bag It, and it's the same information. He's got the same sort of message. I found it initially very discouraging. I mean, I really just wanted to crawl under a rock and give up. But as a parent of 3 children, I realized that I couldn't do that. That wasn't an option. So the plastic bag ban for myself was, and the people that we worked with and the children that rallied to help us to pass it, was about that. It was about saying we would like to own this problem, and we would like to, as a community, make a statement about this problem. And we still live with that problem, or the problem of, and I still live with, I still go to Dunkin' Donuts and get myself a nice coffee in the summer and think, what am I doing? But it's all, I think, in order to live appropriately in the times and the challenges that we're facing, these kinds of projects matter. They matter involving people. They matter in giving ownership to people about the things that we're dealing with. So that's what I have to say.
So I was reading about your campaign, and I understand you approached it on two fronts. One was through education, and other through dealing with, community government and such. Could you elaborate how you approached those?
We had a lot of support in our community for the plastic bag ban. The recycling coordinator attended the meetings that three of us, we met weekly, and she was there with the blessing of our mayor. We had counselors who were in support of it and met with us, telling us what they needed to have us do so that they could pass legislation. And we had a lot of help from the Mass Sierra Club at all points of our work. So the education, the first thing we needed to do was make it be something that people were talking about, so that we would hear why people might be interested in it and why they would fight for it. And then once all those issues were out in the open, we could address them. So it turns out that many people don't want to give up their plastic bags because what are they going to do with their dog's poop? And that was a very serious concern of many people who were adamant against it. Many people were adamant against any kind of limiting of plastic bags because it was their choice to use what they wanted when they bought bags. So we needed to educate them. We needed to have the people who supported it contact their counselors repeatedly, asking for their support on this issue. And we needed them to show up at public meetings to speak their mind. And they did.
Janine,
yeah, I could just add to that I do, like that part, that initial part, if a group of people in a community decide that they would like to go for this, to see what happens. And I think that that's an important approach, to say, let's go for this and see what happens. You do have to get some boots on the ground. We found that, we did a showing of a movie like this. We brought some people in and we talked, and we also had groups of students go out onto, to every single store in Newburyport and ask every single storekeeper how they would feel about it. And we collected a survey and we sort of shared those results, and all those ways of letting the issue bubble up from ourselves, letting it come, spending some time letting it bubble up from our own community, letting it not to feel as though it were being forced or imposed upon people, though many people still feel that way. Many people still don't want to claim these facts or don't know these facts, and they certainly don't want their free will impeded upon through a ban. I think the thing that I finally, and I felt that way. I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm trying to force people to do what I want them to do. And then I did finally hear a quote that helped me that said that yes, free will is definitely, it's ours, but we also have to live with the consequences of our free will choices. And when we live with the consequences of our free will choices in a community, then the community really does have a right to have a discussion about those choices and to make decisions about them. It's not a matter of removing or taking away your rights.
great, thank you. Falko, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think I have anything in particular. I do have to say that I find the work that you guys have done inspiring, and I think it speaks to a lot of the work that we do and a lot of the kind of the positive message we want folks to take away from this screening. It's not that we're powerless. Sometimes you watch stuff like this and that's how you feel. You feel like there's nothing you can really do about it. And one thing that I find working in politics here in Vermont and working up in the Vermont State House is I am energized by the fact that we have a democracy that actually works. We still live in a place where representatives listen to their constituents, they take their concerns to heart, and then they try and act on it, which is really exciting. So that's some of the message I want to bring forward, is that if these issues are things that are really important to you, you can work on the community level, and this is a great model of that. Start going out and talking to your businesses, because businesses are great spokespeople from the community. If they can talk to your legislators as well, they can talk to your local elected officials. That helps make change happen. It's really about connecting with other folks, having the conversation, and then making sure that people are hearing from actual people they care about. So Vermont is a great place because things like that can't happen, and that's why we are able to do big things over and over and over again, because people care about it and they're very conscientious. And that's why we are excited that we think we do have an opportunity to make some big strides forward this year on a number of campaigns which will affect our use of plastics and will help improve our marine environments. The microbeads campaign is one that I'm very excited about, especially because we're seeing movement on it across the country. It's another way to address this bigger issue. And then hopefully I think we got a good chance with the bag tax as well. So exciting times.
So in Newburyport, we did not feel that banning bags in Newburyport would be a major step forward. But we've had a state rep and a state senator working on bringing a state law forward, and it gets shut down every year. So the more communities that sign on gives them clout to say, we've got to bring this out and have an up and down vote on it. Newburyport was the sixth community in Massachusetts to ban the bag, and we were the first city, so it was like a big step. And since then, we've had many more join on, so that the chances at the state level are much greater now.
Great, thank you. I'd like to open it up now to questions.
Hello, thank you for coming. I have one question for VPIRG. So I hear this often, like you're working towards having the ban on microbeads in Vermont. What does that really look like? Does that mean the products can't be sold in stores or imported into the state?
Yes, so that's exactly what it would mean. It would mean products sold in the state of Vermont cannot contain plastic microbeads. As of now, one of the big issues for discussion in this bill is what is biodegradable. So the state of Illinois was the first state to pass any sort of ban on microbeads, but they had a really pesky loophole in there which says, well, the industry can substitute biodegradable microbeads. And as we just saw in this film, biodegradable plastic is an oxymoron. It just doesn't exist. And they created these beads that break down to much smaller parts, and they don't do it in the marine environment. So that's one of the things we made sure is in our legislation, that if it is going to be used as an exfoliant in these products, it has to be able to break down in the marine environment within 24 months of introduction. So that is one of the big components, but that's exactly what it means. It means products sold within the state of Vermont would not be able to contain plastic microbeads. And this is something we just saw the state of California pass. And they are very hard line, just says no plastic microbeads. And that's going to be instituted, I believe, in 2020. So that's a great thing, is when you see the state of California do something like that, that shifts the marketplace, and it also shifts the minds of legislators across the country, because they say, well, if California can do this, or Connecticut can do this, not only do we have California changing the market on the West Coast, we have neighbors here in New England, and that helps move legislators forward. And I have to say, in conversations I've had over the last couple weeks with key members of the committee looking at this, I think we have at least 4 of the 5 members supportive of moving this forward. I mean, we got a unanimous vote out of the House of Representatives last year, and hopefully this is one of the first pieces of legislation we see passed this year.
Thank you.
This has to do with biodegradability. If I go next door to the co-op, I will see cups that look like plastic cups, but I am led to believe that they're biodegradable. And similarly with plastic-looking bags that are supposedly made out of cornstarch or something. The question is, no problem carrying large amounts of stuff with cloth bags and that kind of thing. But when you put things like lettuce in the refrigerator, when you have food to put in the freezer, something that is clear, something that is soft-sided, is a definite convenience. Here we come, plastic. How do you tell, why isn't there more of what looks and acts like plastic, but supposedly isn't, available for the consumer?
I think one answer would be cost. The companies, as we saw in this film, the companies that produce most of these plastics, they have a bottom line that they protect very, very, I'm trying to think of the most diplomatic way to say this. They are always protecting their bottom line. They are going to be putting out the products that the market has a desire for, and as long as people are fine using single-use plastic, they will keep producing it because it's cheap and they can make more money. And I think that's part of it. If you have more people demanding products such as the ones you're describing, I think that will change the market and help drive that demand.
Yeah, and I would simply say that, you know, people want to use less oil. They want to use less gas. And so we have the alternatives in solar and wind energy and so on. And I think the time is here to say there are a number of people who do like what plastic bags do, but please don't make them of plastic.
Let me just add, I think that some of those products that are corn-based, that are the same product, but maybe corn-based or not plastic-based, they're an interesting interim, but they don't change the behavior that needs changing, which is that we actually need to, and I'm also in process here. I am not wearing a halo by any stretch of the imagination, but the behavior that I don't need this bag, the behavior that I don't need this cup, I don't need this, that's the thing that we sort of, and nobody likes that phrase, I guess, very much either, this idea that we're asking you to change your behavior. It gets a little intense, but it really is about really questioning the whole thing about whether or not you need that bag. The other thing I guess I need to say is that if once you ban, say, single-use plastic bags in a community, you will find that you still have a lot of plastic bags in your home. We haven't banned produce bags, we haven't banned bread bags, we haven't banned all these other bags that become available and are still available to you to use. They're not as pretty. To use to put your lettuce in the oven, in the refrigerator, or your cheese, or any of those things, or the oven, no. So there's still a lot of plastic bags around, so if you do choose this one small little target, goal, activity, there's plenty of other ways. It's not all gone. We're not saying plastic is all bad, and there is none, and there's no plastic police in Newburyport, so thank you.
I guess this is a question that perhaps any of you could answer, but the gentleman from VPIRG would probably be the most knowledgeable. You said that we're close to possibly a tax on plastic bags, a bill in the legislature. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us what the evidence is that a tax on plastic bags makes any difference in the amount of plastic bags that people actually take. Does a little penny or two on a bag keep people from taking that bag and choose to use paper or something like that?
Yep. So So I have some handy dandy fact sheets. Happy to hand out after the talk. But this is something that we talk about in D.C. For example. 2 years after the fee, 75% of the folks within Washington D.C. say they have reduced their use of plastic bags. So this is something that was instituted in the city of Washington D.C. 5-cent fee on bags. When people know that, when they know there's that cost, that helps change their behavior. And this is one of the reasons that we support other policies, such as the bottle bill, our bottle deposit law, the state's most successful recycling program. People change their behavior even with those small incentives. So we see people, if you have a water bottle, say, that doesn't have a deposit on it, that ends up in the recycling stream about 25% of the time. Whereas if it has a 5-cent deposit on it, it gets recycled between 75 and 90% of the time. So that helps, just those small little indicators, knowing that it's there, having people think in the back of their head, oh, I'm going to get charged for this, it makes more people bring their bags. It helps drive behavior. So I think Washington, D.C. is a good place to look for an example of a place where this has helped reduce use of single-use bags.
Hi, thanks for doing this panel. Do any of you know what kinds of developments there are about BPA on a national level in terms of its toxicity and whether there's any beginning legislative attempts to ban it?
Our national legislative scene and basically our national regulation of toxic chemicals is woefully inadequate. Right now, there are attempts in Congress to try and help reform TSCA, the Toxic Substance Control Act. They are stalled in the Senate right now. People are going back and forth, trying to come up with some sort of way to move forward on it. But the ability to ban something at the federal level, the current TSCA regulation makes that so difficult. And we saw this when the EPA tried to ban asbestos, was sued, and wasn't able to do that. That put a chilling effect on their regulation going forward. If they say, if we can't ban asbestos, which is a known carcinogen, proven carcinogen, what are we going to do? What can we actually get through? Because that's something the American Chemistry Council, as you saw in this film, they are active, not only in Washington, D.C., but here in Vermont. I was sitting in a room across with a lobbyist talking about our new toxic toy. So the Toxic-Free Family Act we helped pass a few years ago. And all we've required, and this, we were shooting for more, but this is what we got, and it's still a great law. It's something that's leading the way in the country. We have a law that says if you're putting toxic chemicals, one of these 66 known chemicals of high concern, inside of products made for children, intended for use by children, you have to let us know. And so, and by rule, the Department of Health said, and by let us know, we mean that tell us what product it's in, not just, oh, some diapers have this. And they are very upset about this. This is the first time anyone in the country has required that type of information. And I had someone from the American Chemistry Council across the way saying, we care about kids just as much as you do. We want to keep kids just as safe as you do. I had someone from the Toy Industry Association had the gall to tell me every toy on the market is safe. And I couldn't believe it. I looked at every toy on the market is safe? This is what we're dealing with, these people pushing for it, trying to raise the bar so high that no regulators can effectively move forward with a regulation to try and protect the public. And so that's something we're constantly pushing against, trying to get better regulations. And on the federal level, it's stagnant. And so one thing we're fighting hard in the current battle over federal chemical reform is making sure as a state we do not get preempted from our ability to regulate toxic chemicals, because that's one place that we've actually had some success. States have been able to take up this mantle, move forward and effectively regulate chemicals. We've been able to regulate BPA. We've been able to regulate things like flame retardants in furniture. So these are some of the things that we're working for. On the federal level, I don't see it happening soon, but that is something that we're trying to make sure states still have the ability to regulate. So that was a long answer. Sorry about that.
Hi. Now that you mentioned it, I was wondering about making returnable water bottles and juice bottles and things the way that is the case in at least 2 other states that are on our labels.
So yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. So another thing for those folks who happen to either be on our mailing list or have heard VPIRG talk about anything for the last 30 years, we are longtime supporters of the state's bottle bill. As I said, it's the state's oldest and most successful recycling program, and we think it needs to be expanded. We think it does need to be on things like sports drinks and water bottles, things that weren't even imagined when this law was created back in 1973. At that point, basically people were putting beer inside of cans, and that was one of the major, and some soda, that was it. Carbonated beverages, mostly going into cans. Since then, we've expanded the universe of what products we're putting in single-use packaging. And we need to put that extra, we need to not only cover more things under our deposit law, but we should also increase the deposit. This is what states like Michigan does. And you get more people recycling. It's what we've seen across the country. There are significantly lower rates for anything that doesn't have a deposit on it. And this is the idea of extended producer responsibility. They talked a little bit about in the film that if you are producing this waste, if you're putting it out there, you have a responsibility for its stewardship. And that's something that we are very supportive of with the bottle bill. I will say this year, up in the State House, we are going to be facing a frontal attack on the bottle bill from Coca-Cola. They hate it. They really don't like it. They don't like being responsible for their waste. And so what they're going to say is they're going to try and do what they did in Delaware, where they said, you know what? How about this? Let's get rid of that stupid deposit law. I don't feel like collecting those bottles and cans anymore. I don't want to pick those up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 1 penny for each one of those bottles we sold. And for about 3 years, you can keep getting that money. We'll put it towards recycling. Then after that, we're washing our hands. We're walking away. And so that's what they're going to be trying to do this year. And we're going to be pushing back hard on that because we think this is an important way to get more recyclables into the system and keep more bottles and cans out of landfills.
In Massachusetts, it was a referendum question on our last ballot, and the bottling industries came out with huge amounts of money and they defeated it. It was devastating. All the environmental groups were working for it and all the others were not, but we're going to try again.
Yeah. So that MassPIRG was very much involved in that campaign, and they faced huge resources.
They were one of the major
on the other side.
Yeah.
I have a question, I think this is for Falko, about the source of manufacture of plastic, because you talked a lot about the chemical industries, but I also was under the impression that petroleum is a part of plastics. And so I'm wondering, who makes this stuff? And sort of are the chemical industries and the petroleum industries both involved? And sort of what's the nature of that relationship and the whole stream of production?
So petrochemicals are 100% part of the production of plastics, and it is many of these large companies that are involved in both petroleum and in chemicals are involved in the making of these plastics. So I think that you were 100% right in your assumption there.
So do they, is it petroleum? I heard mention Exxon as one of the manufacturers, but also Dow Chemical. So
and they
how
are
do they work together? How does it?
Through trade organizations. And this is where we see a lot of the most dangerous lobbying happening, both on the state and federal level. You deal with folks like the American Chemistry Council, or for instance, when we were working on the GMO labeling campaign, you deal with folks like the Grocery Manufacturers Association or the Biotechnology Industry Organization. What they do is they are fierce competitors. None of them really like each other. They're trying to make a buck over the other guy. But when it comes to circling the wagons and getting their own, and protecting their own interests, they're very, very good. And they pool their money in these trade organizations that helps keep them a little bit separated from consumers. And the pushback you get from consumers, consumer backlash. They put a lobbyist in there. They put, they pay for front groups. For instance, in California, when they were trying to regulate toxic flame retardants, they created a group called Californians for Fire Safety. Flew in 10-year-old kids talking about, you don't want to hear, imagine hearing a 10-year-old kid burn to death and saying, oh, I could have been protected by those flame retardants. And these are flame retardants that have been proven to save no lives at this point. And it's just one of those, but they have been shown to increase profits when you require them to be sprayed on every single piece of furniture sold in California and therefore driving the rest of the market. So they are very good at circling the wagons, working through industry trade groups, and then doing the best to protect their interest.
You had mentioned Coca-Cola being very resistant to the bottle bill or approaching, this is in the state of Vermont legislation. Okay. My students attended a youth environmental summit sponsored by UVM Extension 4-H. Coca-Cola was there as one of the vendors at an environmental summit, giving out plastic bottles with iced tea in it. And I just think that I'm kind of shocked. I was kind of surprised I heard it anyways, that why would Coca-Cola be there at an environmental summit for children?
Yeah, it's
Hear about the bottle bill and then giving away the plastic bottles of the iced tea, which is honest tea. They were making it in plastic, so I don't think there's a bottle like a 5-cent.
No, iced tea is not carbonated, so.
Okay, so that's like a double thing there.
Yeah.
And I just think I may be sending a letter to the organizer saying our kids will never participate in this. Like,
So.
does it seem like going under the radar to kind of manipulate the situation?
Yeah, I think that's an attempt to put out a greener image. It's interesting you bring this up. We had some organizers at that actual event working with some high school students who vigorously debated the Coca-Cola representative for their plastic usage and basically said, why are you here? They were talking about how this plastic that we create and put our soda in, it then becomes your fleece. And that's their big pitch. It then becomes your fleece. Yes, some of it does, but a ton of it ends up in our oceans. A ton of it ends up in our landfills. And even more of it ends up in our landfills if you're fighting things like successful recycling programs. So I don't think you're the only one who had some issues with them being there, and I'm hearing about some other folks who are probably going to be talking with those organizers as well.
Did they pay to sponsor it?
I am not sure if they paid to sponsor it. I just don't know.
That may have been how they got under.
So I have one, I guess maybe kind of winding down here, a last question for Sheila and Janine, is that if anyone in Windham County or Brattleboro, wants to, move the bag ban forward in Brattleboro, we know that VPIRG is working on a state level, but maybe that is only the 5-cent incentive, so maybe a ban is, that much step further. How do we get in touch with you guys? Because we know that you already did this, and we know that you successfully worked with the community and the businesses, and how do we reach you to find out how you did it and get your guidance?
You two have our emails, so I would say that would be the easiest way. We
You
could
guys-
say our emails, but it would be hard to catch.
Do you check your Facebook page? I mean, because I think that you have
yes.
a Facebook page.
We do have a Facebook page.
Maybe and it's called Citizens for Sustainable Bagging, right?
Right.
Okay. There's some very cool pictures of kids.
I just have a comment, and I don't have a solution, but I have two things that I've been in touch with the film, and I understand politically, we do certain things because of politics, but I do want to say that, the point of view is always, how it's going to help the humans. And I think you said, we're talking about we have to change a way of thinking. And for me, when I watch that film, I'm affected by the life that is being affected, all life, what's happening. And so it's this kind of thinking where it's like, well, how's it gonna, we're the apex, the top, and we're eating the fish, and yes, but also, in other viewpoints and indigenous viewpoints, you don't think like that. So there's that. And then my other comment would just be, is there a way, and I was sitting here just trying to think of some catchy phrase, but is there a way, instead of saying we're going to do a bag ban, is there any other language that we can say so that all these issues of free will, which brings into this all of, these consequences. Can we just make a huge campaign for making cloth bags or reusing cloth bags, and instead of a ban, we just make a huge campaign about going door to door and doing all these things you would do for a bag ban, but saying, here, we're distributing cloth bags, or, oh, do you want to be on this campaign? We're doing a sewing circle, and then we're going to go and we're going to give these out, and it's just a different orientation to those things. I understand politically, there's all these things and you have to work within, but I just want to put that forward in the conversation.
Yeah, I think that you need to take the temperature of your own community. You know your community, and you know what language will work with each other. And that really it's all about, most of the work that Sheila and I did started with the transition movement. I don't know if you know of the transition movement out of the UK, which is about really moving away from fossil fuels altogether. And they have a model about how we use our head, our heart, and our hands to make change, right? So we understand things in our head, but if we spend too much time in our heads, then we can get easily sidetracked, and we'll go around in circles, and lots of people will help us do that. When we move into our hearts, then we come up with the right solutions, and we make the right connections with our people. So whatever we've done and all the choices that we've made, they may serve as an interesting model. I hope that they serve as a way of saying, you know, we can do these things, we can make change, but in the end, every community needs to do it their own way. That's what I would say.
Great, thank you, Janine. And let's take a moment and thank our panelists. I think the next film is getting, and thank you everyone for staying. And great, thank you.